Yeah, and Jason having to do this whole kind of rigmarole with Medea of like, oh no, I don't want to marry her, but it's politically expedient, and like and her jealousy, as it were. I mean that's an interesting bit of well, it adds a certain bit of dramatic tension, and because in most stories of Jason and Medea, we're told that Jason just becomes exhausted with Medea, right? That he realizes that she's kind of she's too foreign, she's too wild, she's a sorceress. By the time he gets back, he kind of wants a new bit of arse.
Yeah.
So this is a bit more interesting, and has a bit more depth than just Jason being a shallow character.
Yeah, but the, like I said, with a lot of the Greek stuff, that the quick clip pace of the stories where people become friends in just 2 or 3 lines, lifelong bosom buddies,
Yeah.
you hear Jason is not the deepest character, but he's trying, and that get the fact that he tries and fails makes him more interesting than just being the bad guy. Because I one of my favorite things that I do in here is Jason is talking about his own kingship, and he's talking to one of his assistants, or maybe no, it was when his father, the ghost of his father, comes to him, and his father says, you look at me as being the bad guy who ruined things. He said, but you killed and imprisoned more political prisoners than I ever did. And,
Yeah.
Peleus only killed 2 people in his reign, and he reigned longer than both of us combined or something. I killed 77, whatever I gave it, and Jason killed 180-something political prisoners. So he's even more of a despot. And so that's, you get into that whole kind of Stalin-esque thing about, when do numbers matter? When does someone become evil when they order the death of someone? And Jason, I guess, gets this at a certain level, but he still stumbles through life because he's still focused on his own end. And once his sons are dead, he basically gives up the ghost of existing. He's content to be a bum in the 5th play.
Yeah, so I suppose it's about kind of bringing a much needed sense of elegance and consequence, as it were, to this myth, which has always seemed to lack those sort of things, at least. Kind of the messiness, the weirdness, the absurdity of the original Argonauticus cycle, which everybody's always kind of been aware of, and has sort of been a challenge to people dealing with the myth.
Well,
How do you make this whole chain of weird stuff work together as a coherent? Now, I mean, and most people don't even do that. They'll take fragments, they'll take parts of the myth and deal. So, like for instance, I mean, my God, I mean, Harryhausen only really deals with the story of the fleece, and Jeffers and Aeschylus before him deal explicitly with the Medea story. So it seems a real challenge to get all these things working together, as it were, as a kind of seamless, tapestry.
Well, you have to know what to focus on. One of the great scenes in the Harryhausen film is the giant bronze man, whose name slips my mind off the top of my head. Talos, right? Talos, the great bronze man. And I remember, just to go back to that first time I saw it on the big screen, it was much scarier to see it in color. The blackness of that character's eyes, not because black is evil, but there's nothingness there. And then when he looks down at Heracles, and you see Heracles even running away, or Hercules in the movie running away with the Cassis, I think it is, and that's just a great scene. But the 5th play is probably my favorite play, since it's the one that I have the most freedom to do with, since it's set afterward. And basically, it's basically King Lear set in Greece, because instead of wandering around the heaths, Jason is shambling around a drunken bum, going through the garbage cans of that era, or whatever they did, the back alleys, the backs of taverns or pubs or whatever they had then, and eating this or that, and he's sort of a local joke, it seems, because, and this is too, in the final play, I bring in more characters, extras, people who are just walking. Jason has finally become part of the crowd. He is the man of the people by the end. But every so often he'll say, I was Jason of the Argonauts. And they're like, yeah, sure you were.
We also have the gods sort of giving their commentary and sort of attempting, as it were, to sort of ask, well, what's this all mean in the end? So sort of what's this all come to? And sort of Hera's sort of asking Zeus, but also I suppose asking the audience to sort of sympathize with Jason, and sort of and Zeus is saying, why should we? I mean, he came from nothing, and he didn't necessarily earn like his stature, his station, and now we should feel sorry for him because he wants all this stuff back. And so I suppose the gods are as well, they're trying to in their own terms sort of resolve kind of the story for us or for themselves.
Well, Jason ends up basically finding the Argo, because the basic setup of the play is that his oldest son, the two youngest sons were killed. His oldest son was spirited away by Medea, Thessalus. He then basically redoes the whole Jason thing. He's taken away after the Corinthians sacked the city. He comes back as a young man, takes the city back, and he's the best of all the kings. He's the best. He's got the blood of Aeetes. He's got the blood of Aeson. He's got the blood of Jason, and he's the spiritual descendant, supposedly. He's the better king than Acassus would have been had he become king. And so he takes over. He's actually going to make a museum. I got that idea. There's a lot of, here in America, they have old warships and they make floating museums out of these ships of death, basically. Let's see how people killed each other in the Second World War. Isn't that fascinating? But so the Argo is going to be restored. And this brings back, the whole Theseus, the ship of Theseus thing about, if they restore the Argo, is it really the Argo? And Thessalus, sends a messenger. Because apparently it's gotten back to the king in the big city. This is some podunk town that Jason is wandering around in. In the big city, it's gotten back that there's some whack job who claims he's Jason. So Thessalus sends one of his messengers. The messenger, they go through a whole rigmarole, a pretty funny, interesting scene, I think. And he goes back and says that he can't he's not allowed to legally kidnap Jason back, but that the king will come to him. Muhammad coming to the mountain. Thessalus comes down to the small podunk town. He believes this is his father. They don't have genetic testing then, but he believes this is his father and says, come on back. Let me take you back. You can be king emeritus. You can, you'll have your respect. I've redeemed the family name. And Jason basically says, well, maybe I will sometime, but he doesn't. He ends up, by the end of the play, seemingly he snuck back into town, and one night he's on the Argo, and the ghosts of Theseus and Heracles come to him. Now, one of the things I really like about the ending of the play is Heracles has now ascended to godhood. He briefly gives a 2 or 3 sentence answer about what his adventures since he left the play cycle earlier. How he died and what. And by the end, though, it doesn't matter, because Heracles, the greatest of all the demigods, the greatest of all the ancient heroes, the most powerful, the most Christ-like, literally the Christ myth took stuff from Heracles and half a dozen other gods, but literally he just becomes an afterthought, and he just sort of, he's there on stage but doesn't say anything, and you end up with a dialogue between Jason and his younger self. Jason and his younger self, Chloe and Danny as Zeus and Hera, and basically the play ends with younger Jason. They're talking existentially, and then there's a blackout, and we just hear wood snap, boom, and silence, and then in the dark we just hear younger Jason's voice, basically talking about well, basically que sera, 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 and that's how it ends.
Then Chloe says, "Wow."
Yeah.
Yeah, there's also like this sort of spectral figure, sort of perhaps death, who sort of beckons Jason, come, or
and that I call him the figure. And you know where I got that from? From one of Jessica's favorite movies, Carnival of Souls. There's the figure.
Oh,
there's the figure of death that keeps chasing the blonde, the beautiful blonde character who turns out to be dead. Which, if you know that, and now you'll know that if you've seen this, if that is death, is everything then something that's being looked back upon? Is who's really in charge here? Is it any of the mortals? Is it Hera? Is it Zeus? Is it Chloe? Is it Danny, the author? Or is it the figure?
Well, it's if like to sort of voice my own opinion here, it's got to be Danny, isn't it? Because all of this is, we can see it diegetically is a play, and this takes place within the play. So like it's got to be Danny. But then that's me risking my own controversial opinion there. But to digress for a moment though, the name of the whole cycle, Argonautilus, I said I really liked it.
It's a mixture of the Argonautica and the Nautilus, the submarine.
It makes me think of Captain Nemo.
Right, and I mentioned that in the play, Nemo. And Nemo, in whatever language it's from, in French, I think, means no one.
No one, yeah.
Yeah, and so you can interpret that as you want. But this is one of the things with art that you need to do. You have to put a lot... here in America we have bagels, and what they did was they would have salt bagels, they'd have sesame seed bagels, they'd have rye bagels, they put everything on. But what happened is, at the end of the day, they'd have a little bit of leftover of all the spices, and then they put them all together and make an everything bagel. And in art, you have to sort of do that too. Is the idea of the figure, or the man, as they call it from Carnival of Souls, the figure of Zeus and Hera being played by actors who have been written by one of the actors, Danny, the author. The figure of death, the whole inverting of certain things, the strengthening of other things.
So the Argonautilus is an everything bagel, Dan.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you try. I mean, and it's different. If you compared these 5 plays with the 5 plays of King Arthur, there's a fundamental difference. This is a much more, I think, bleak and nihilistic series. But not nihilistic in a negative sense. Nihilism, it doesn't have to be negative. I mean, one can say that Jason accepts throughout, especially in the last half of this play, or the whole play. In fact, he basically accepts in the 5th play that he's going to die. He's going to die ignominiously. Will people remember him? There's the echo of the Percy Bysshe Shelley poem Ozymandias there. Who is going to remember all of these people? I think I even, in the 1st or 2nd play, I have Theseus or Heracles asking pretty much the same question as the Shelley poem. Who's going to remember us in 50 and 500 and 5,000 years? It all blows away, kind of thing. And yet we see, I think, very compelling characters.
Obviously we don't know, because the myth lives on forever, doesn't it?
Sure, but
not to contradict you there, but that's if anything, it's the proles and the peasants we forget. It's the heroes that we remember.
Yeah, well, which is one of the reasons too, though. In the end, Jason wants to be a plebeian. He wants to be forgotten. I think he even says at some point, he feels more of himself than he ever did on the throne. Just scavenging through the garbage of the day.
Yeah, so a more banal existence, I suppose, a drudgery and what have you. I mean, I seem to recall a poem by Brecht where he says kind of like all the great pyramid. We remember sort of the pharaohs whom the pyramids were built to memorialize and what have you. But we're never going to remember all the slaves who lug up the giant bricks.
Yeah, people remember the architects. They don't remember the workers.